Good evening. Good evening. I'm so glad you're here. So, karibuni sana. I want to welcome you for being here. And everybody, this is our second night. So, I want to know how your day was. Not just your day, but the weekend. The last time we were here, we talked about Vision 2060. We did a very good introduction. One of our outcomes of that discussion was that the Kenyan sector is basically, the Vision 2030 was basically written for Kenya. It was written as an extraction machine, so that you find that all the systems that were set up, from the conditions under which it was set, to what it has achieved, to how policy since Vision 2030 started being set up by external factors, that has basically been to endear, to achieve what was, I think one of the comments was new global world order, and under this is where Kenya is just an extraction in the periphery of the extractive Western machine. So that is our Vision 2030. Now today we go into a new chapter. I think I want to change, yes, I think it's better this way. And so in this new chapter, we are basically going to look at a couple of things. As I start that, I want to go to the group, because we have a group that is basically here. Okay, the group is live. Oh, some of the groups have posted this. So let me get another group so that I can make sure they are participating. Just a second. There's a group here. Good evening, we are live. All right, I have informed the group that we are live. So, karibuni. As now we proceed with this, today we go to chapter 3. But I want to do a very quick recap of our last video. Not so much the video, but the coverage. What we looked at, this was written by Professor Nyanyongo, coming back with Zilizopendwa, celebrating for some reason, and this was the main document. Actually, let's go where we ended this. Basically, the roadmap is very clear. So as a quick recap, the roadmap is very clear that where Kenya stands today, according to the government, according to Vision 2030, is that we are lower middle income economy with a per capita income of about $2,200. Poverty and inequality challenges, not even showing how that huge gap is. We also having a manufacturing rate of 7% of our GDP, basically. It means that we are a consumptive economy, and not just consumptive, because we are in the single digits of manufacturing. I think this should tell Kenyans just how if you're talking of now going to be industrialized and you're at 7%, and you have had a vision that you've been deploying for the 20-something years, and you're at 7%, that's a problem. But it's even a bigger problem when you realize that before Vision 2030, we had a manufacturing base of about 14% to 18%. So before Vision 2030, we were doing better than after Vision 2030. And this is the paradox that the entire document of Vision 2030 doesn't address. But of course, the 2060 is also trying to lay out, because it is using the same false layout and basis as Vision 2030. Then, of course, productivity constraints remain. Productivity here, they were not pushing production, they were more of looking productivity. Productivity is efficiency of doing things. Production is that transformational mechanism. So their focus is also, I don't know whether there is a confusion of the word. So efficiency of doing things is not so much an issue, but it should be your ability to actually do the thing. So they are measuring the efficiency to do things. So what is this efficiency? Considering we have a 7% manufacturing base, the education, the inequality, what is this that you are looking at? So the government then becomes more of a service deliverer, and they are measuring their ability to do things rather than their ability to enable Kenyans to be productive. And I think in terms of, I know I am taking notes, and I have the notes here, but one of the things that I'm going to be taking tonight, and like last time, because I realized I'm still old school enough to write, is actually add that element. Just the distinction between the government of Kenya not seeming to be aware that they must first boost the production capacity of Kenyans before you push productivity. Productivity is a fluid thing. It's dynamic. It is related on technology and other things. So you must first be able to be productive. Then you now work on your productivity. But I know it could be one or the other. I'm sure some people might argue on the semantics. And the final one is now public service reform. Momentum has weakened. They actually want to hasten this. Today, when we're looking at healthcare, we looked at the way healthcare now is fully captured, and the final bite was now digitizing the system. The system now has made it easier to capture. It can be captured by anyone in the world. In fact, part of SHA is being delivered from across Kenya. It's not even being delivered by Kenyans. Our national healthcare system, insurance fund, is being managed by an AI system that is not even domiciled in Kenya. So it is that much captured. And so when now they talk of slowing down, it means they want to capture everything. We also talked about the security sector. You saw that is also fully digitized and captured. So you can see where their focus is. And now when we're looking at some of the things like infrastructure, you see what they're doing with water. Places like aquifers, you see where the World Bank is funding. Because sometimes you need to look at World Bank spent almost 5 to 7 years, but the last up to 2024 or 2023, just funding Lapset, Lamu water, then you hear Dangote is coming. Like that. So when you have these conditions, then you can see where they are focusing their money is they are trying to create a new extraction corridor. And so their effectiveness of reform, or what did they call it, momentum, is basically pushing where the next element of extraction comes from. So without further ado, we looked at the lessons for success, which they laid out as agriculture. Then they went on to the issue of industry, exports, innovation, and prosperity. So that was it. We also looked very quickly, the first agricultural pillar transformation, we looked at this is a false thesis. It has never led to anything meaningful. You should be looking at food. So the thesis of agriculture distorts the entire picture. If this is your journey, your first step in the developmental journey. When it comes to now the second pillar of industrialization, then we looked at the conditionalities of which they were talking about value addition and manufacturing. And yet they are not able, their work is, they're pushing the export capability. And we saw whether it is China, whether it is Vietnam, they first were saying, if you can clothe yourself, then you can clothe the world. By that I mean, Kenya is exporting, for example, some piece of clothes, textiles from the GIZ, no, not GIZ, sorry, the EPZs on in Kitengela. This is interesting. It's commendable if we were able to clothe ourselves, but we can't. So you could be saying, if this is the push, and this has always been, other things we are manufacturing that we don't get, they are very similar. So they make it so that we have just a little bit of products that they can say we are manufacturing, but they can't be able to serve Kenyans. And of course, they are not meeting any of the Kenyan, you'd call them basic needs. So food, clothing, textile, so clothing and housing, which we should be able to look as much of local resources as possible, unless something needs to be imported. For example, when it comes to farming, we know fertilizer for some time now will have to be imported, and so on and so forth. All right, then they went to the third pillar, is technology, innovation, and knowledge economy. We talked about this being not so much a pillar, but an enabler. This must be the thing that you have to set in place, not to be the end goal, because we saw how they measured something like education. This was measured not as in terms of how much job it's bringing after what you call the return on investment. We are not measuring education also in terms of the jobs it has created and how it has improved the Kenyan economy in terms of we educated 500,000 doctors or engineers and now our engineering sector is top notch. No, they are measuring education outcomes based on time spent in school. This is the craziest form of twisted upside down thinking I have ever come across, because they are measuring the activity, the performance of education, not the purpose or the results of that education. Even the purpose itself, it's not even a factor that they are using to measure and to either to measure or to monitor. No, it is the time spent so that they can keep more children in school. The more people are in school, and remember now education is also very much privatized. So money spent by parents without a guaranteed or even any form of surety in return on investment for all that time. Because also time is money. Time in Kenya for education is money, but that is not measured. So technology as well. We saw how technology is fully captured in Kenya. People talk of data as having coverage and everything. They forget that Kenyans paid for that fiber optic to be laid across the country. And we have now the private providers who came in and provide it for cheaper. Every new guy provides it cheaper and cheaper and cheaper. Cheaper for what? It should be 1,000,000 times cheaper because it's a national public infrastructure. See, but the trick of the mind is to make it appear like it is a product created 100% by somebody, by so and so, but it's not. So we are now going to chapter 3. We looked at all the false starts, right? We looked at 1980, they talked of agriculture. We looked at the 1986 question of the structural adjustment programs, which by the way they didn't mention or look deep into. In fact, they say it was an interruption of industrialization. It wasn't. It was deliberate deindustrialization, and that is very important. And so in the economic planning, for example, when they say Kenya went through agricultural growth, the industrial revolution, it's also a lie, because we found out and we were able to design and of course objectively point out that almost all the industries in Kenya were functional. Because remember, before now this Vision 2030, before Kibaki, Kenya was essentially operating as a sanctioned nation. So we could barely afford to import anything. So whatever Kenyans were using came from within. We had that capacity, from our pharmaceuticals to our home goods to electronics, not electronics, sorry, that was assembly, but electronics assembly to construction material, household items, to now soaps, textiles, books, everything was made in Kenya. In fact, it took up, including batteries. We had a variety. We missed out on batteries simply because, and we talked about this, I think I mentioned it, because when the world was now starting to transition from the batteries, the ones that like Eveready, because that was a big company in Kenya, was now people are exploring solar and renewable sources. That was a thing that people were exploring. And Kenya had a lot of this random mzungu. That's when the first time they came. They came to Kenya because Kenyans were still very educated and Kenyans had been sanctioned. So which means people were very technologically eager to basically try out as many new innovations as possible. So when the power people came, energy companies came, they identified Kenya, especially within East Africa, as a place to start testing a lot of the solar products. And this became a very good testing ground. But then it started a trend that now picked up, or has picked up now to everything else, where we become a testing ground and they take away the things. So what happens with like battery? They came, they tested the solar elements, but manufacturing went to China. Because Kenya now at that time, electricity, we saw now those basics, electricity had become too hard and people were no longer being trained, and Kenyans were now being spoon-fed very cheap imports. And so nobody was willing to try local stuff. And there was that deliberate effort, because if things are too expensive, and taxation. One of the biggest tax hikes in Kenya happened under Mwai Kibaki. I know we still complain about it, but goodness me. That was a big deal for a lot of people. People had never paid taxes. So it was the equivalent of the hat tax coming to Kenya, disrupting families and society. This was now that one coming to Kenya, disrupting real business. In fact, a lot of businesses got locked out just because of that tax thing. Because remember, they didn't do a lot of education. Of course, over time now they've done education. KRA has really taken a lot of effort to do that. But at that time, nah, a lot of people were taken out. And so they talk about the economic recovery, strategy for wealth and employment creation, ERS, which was now now this was the time there was a big heist on all sectors. If you want money, rather than the government funding special projects within economic zones to spur that, and also repairing what had been broken. One of the things Kenyans expected of Kibaki was the repair of the economy, and that would be more irrigation scheme. The irrigation canals are too old. People are, if there are too many farms now, they need to be expanded. Nothing. It's like, go take a loan. In fact, break that cooperative, go take a loan and enjoy that. So we started now to see the push towards, instead of the government working, it was now adding profit players. So brokers, money brokers, insurance brokers, everybody now was able to go into any private project and be able to do that brokerage. Besides that, we started now seeing the issue of exports, the few exports, particularly coffee, tea, that people had thought would resume back to normal, being taken over by also local brokers. Now, those people became very powerful because Kenya was now again allowed to trade. And so they took over and they went and now pushed this thing across the world. So yeah, that's an issue. So that was Vision 2030. And Vision 2030, we see the issues of, so some of the things they talked about was the foundation of the economy, macroeconomic reality. The macroeconomic reality of Vision 2030 has never handled three key things. Number one, the land issue. It did not handle that. How do you base an entire nation on an artificial layer? You assume people are going to be productive, industrialized without that. That was the first thing. Secondly, there was no national planning to implement Vision 2030. And by that I mean, you say you have Vision 2030, it was pushed into government. Government, who are not even workers, they're supposed to be now under this new dispensation. They're supposed to be like, they are to manage the contractors, because management consultants and consultants became the people who are doing the work for government. By national planning, it meant we did not have a movement where you push now education towards achieving Vision 2030. You push sectors on the ground, from the entire ground, not just things went on as normal. In fact, to the normal people, that is what happened. You push agriculture, you say agriculture is going to take this. But that was not taken over by NGOs. We saw a lot of NGOs going to the most fertile places, introducing whatever crops they wanted. And that was a concern. My dog is really barking. I want to go and check him. I'm sorry you're here. You can ask questions, so that I can come back and basically we have comments. Hi everybody. Okay, Grace, where was the live? I didn't see it. What alternative path can Kenya pursue to achieve genuine socio-economic justice? All right. Ian, I think it is first of all to address the historical things. This is what we had covered at the beginning. To be genuine in saying, like I've said, Vision 2030 did not address the historical issues of land and justice, number one. Number two, there was no national planning. I think this comes to that. It's not so much the alternative path, Ian, but it's more of reversing Kenya to 1965. I think you all know the sessional paper. The other thing for sessional paper was the Constitution of Kenya promises universal education, universal healthcare, all these what you'd call socialist promises, so to speak. They are literally promises, because in capitalist nation, the only way they are achieved is by extraction. You've seen France, you've seen Europe, and you've seen America. America can't even afford that. Education, healthcare, all these people now have to pay. So for you to achieve that universal cover, then you must be able to undo sessional paper 10 that says Kenya shall pursue that capitalistic agenda, and to go back to 1963 promise or 1964 promise that now promises Kenya being a nationalistic state for all, and then this promise is now archived in that original constitution. We're not saying reverse the constitution, but reverse that structural historical element. So issues of land and ownership of elements of production, but also removing, because if you remove the sessional paper element or issues, then you're able to quickly counter, of course, the neoliberal policies of 1986. The 1986 ones are now the ones that neoliberalized Kenya, but they neoliberalized Kenya based on the framework of the sessional paper. So in this, you are saying now Kenya is an open market, so you close it, because you not only have the justification of removing sessional paper 10 and saying it was built on duress. Remember, at this time, Kenya had to choose Russia or the US. It was in the midst of the Cold War. So they chose the US. And so addressing that as Kenyans. But no, we seem to have moved on as if the path we are following is the right path, and also as if Kenyans chose this. Kenyans did not choose this path on a very deliberate way. And so that, I think, is part of it. So genuine alternative path is basically to remove the sessional paper, to remove the neoliberal structural adjustments that were brought in by the IMF and World Bank. That has to be the thing. And then now work backwards towards addressing the economic injustices. So to me, in a more what I call practical way, is first to deal with the neoliberal policies. If you do that, then you can quickly defund. You can defund education. You can define, not education per se, define private education. Immediately, you remove any path from private to public. And today we are going to talk about education. Then you define healthcare. You remove any private insurance, any private hospital, no public money. Money goes from the taxpayer to the SHA, and from SHA directly to the hospital, because the hospital takes care of the patient. It will never go to an individual, and these hospitals are 100% public. Besides the hospitals, then it goes to the drug companies to provide the medicine and the equipment people. So then you have that sourcing for economies of scale, and so on and so forth. So that money goes to pay people, work with the hospital, all these things, clean the hospitals, keep the place managed, that kind of thing. So it is defunding the structural adjustment programs, in essence, reversing Vision 2030, because you saw when Vision 2030 starting, Kenya is industrial, whatever is over 15%. Right now, after implementing Vision 2030, we are seeing 7%. When you talk about the genuine economic justice, that's part of it. Because when you now are a consumer country that is also loaded by loans, right? We are managed, because we have so little that we produce, we're basically being managed through loans. It means every other day we are selling our sovereignty to external forces forever. And the external forces to whom we are selling, they are all capitalist forces. And therefore, Kenya is sinking deeper and deeper into the neoliberal trap. And we've never even had a chance to industrialize in a way that we can have cushions to take care of us in times of distress, because it's going to get worse and worse and worse. So those are the questions. I'm going to check that dog. It keeps barking. Please give me a moment. I'll be right back. I can just put a comment here and say, I am sorry. Checking the dog. I will be back in a sec. It won't take a minute. I just want to make sure that there is no issue. So just hold that. I don't yet have something a filler for a second. Mr. Neri, Mr. Neri, come. Come. Anthony, Neri cannot be back. Come. Say hi to the people on YouTube. Not you, Neri. Okay, I'm back. All right, I'm back. I apologize. All right. He's going to lie there. I think he'll be better off if you're here. Thank you. For those joining, I had just gone to check the dog. Now we go back. We have resumed. So I've answered the questions. So I'll be answering questions every 20 minutes. Just going through all of them. The other document that we had is government accountability gaps and environmental reliance changes. One of the things I think I talked about, it's now gotten warmer. One of the things we talked about here was Kenya's push towards climate resilient policies, right? Every policy had to be climate smart, climate smart, climate smart, which was in tune with the global movement towards the energy, whatever, all elements of climate change and the earth. This is proper and right. But Kenya buys into things like carbon credits. It buys into systems that now basically are promoting what you would call other interests that make Kenya become not a participant in climate work, but become what you call renta mzungu. A lot of solutions came to be tested here, but Kenyans are not able to access them and the funding, and yet all the tests are being conducted here. If you go now to, say, climate smart, there is carbon removal. Kenya is participating in a couple of ways, from fertilizers and soil health. We are seeing a lot of farms that are venture capital funded, dealing with biochar, dealing with soil conditioning, dealing with all sorts of things. Then you go to carbon harvesting and all these things that are happening in the Rift Valley. Kenyans are not familiar. But the only thing Kenyans were taught or are familiar with is, shockingly and unsurprisingly, what is being pushed by a lot of donors and NGOs on selling carbon credit. So carbon credit has become an anathema to the Kenyan, because you are told not to grow crops in your farm or to keep animals or to do anything on that farm, so that its credits can be harnessed by a company in Canada, in the US, in any Western nation, so that they can continue polluting their part of the world, and you are paid money to keep your land and other resources idle. Now, a lot of people would think this is a boon, but we've seen the destructive effect of this carbon credit, whatever it is, because first of all, destroying that part of the world has an impact on this part of the world. We know that. You can't be saying we destroy on one side and we preserve the other side. But more importantly for the Kenyan, you may say, I don't care about that, but you should also care of all the workers and the people in the world of that side, because they're experiencing high food prices, high prices because those companies transfer the carbon credit payment back to the consumer. So people are paying, Canadians, Americans, Europeans are paying high prices on the till so that Africans can remain idle. And then Africans themselves are not working. Africans here, you go to Narok, you go to Taita Taveta, you are told, we have this ranch, we are not going to keep any more cattle because of methane. What we are going to do is we'll get carbon credit. So stop whatever you're doing, you'll be getting 30, 40, 30, $60,000, shillings a day, a year. And so people stopped working. People are just waiting for that money to come. So they are losing skills of that economic activity. They are losing also the muscle memory of work is very important. And then Trump comes and cancels it. So it was like whatever it was, we don't want to say it was a scam, but it appears it was, because you're paying somebody, transferring that cost to your consumers, and you are the one as a corporation who is polluting and being destructive of your environment, and then paying Africans not to work. Like, make that make sense. Rather than actually pursuing genuine efforts of carbon and climate smart activities, carbon reduction and climate smart activities. So for me, I found that to be the biggest lie that was imposed on the people. The final thing we talked about, or we have seen, is now the issue of what they call infrastructure. Infrastructure in Kenya is just building roads. So first of all, we have that challenge of the same one we have with education. Are you building roads to have roads, or are you building roads for mobility, to move people and goods effectively and to connect people? That is a question. It is not answered because transport in Kenya was killed. Both in rail and road, urban mobility is a problem. It is very expensive and is privatized. That's one part. The other part of it is that we saw these trunks are on extractive corridors, right? You have those lapses, you have those major highways and things being done basically to allow extraction in places. We are not saying the road should not come from Lamu to Turkana through Isiolo, that whole region. No. We are saying the way it is designed, because it's just a super highway, the same way you have Mombasa highway coming from Mombasa to Nairobi and so on and so forth, just basically a transit. That's the same thing that is being done. The other part of infrastructure was now just increasing all these roads, but there is no, up to today, if you are talking of Vision 2030 and the workers don't have transportation in Kenya, then it's a lie. Because those roads, which by the way are funded through loans, all of them, and then the fuel levy, which is used to pay that for most of them, then they are going to extractive corridors, not production of Kenyans, and the Kenyans who use them as consumers. They use them to mainly go and do work that is not even productive, because you've seen things like industries are now 7% of the GDP. And so you create this cycle of you have loans to pay for this thing you have built, and yet you don't have enough. It has not served you enough. The roads you have built in Kenya now, we cannot afford to pay them based on the economic activity for which they have been purposed or where they have been put. So the only way these roads will have a return on investment to the World Bank and the IMF is that we can see there are clear extraction corridors in the northern frontier districts, in northern Kenya, and so on and so forth. So that's what we know. They are opening that part. All right. Of course, agriculture. We saw all the slave crops that have been introduced. We had slave crops introduced at colonial times. The only other time Kenyans enjoyed a surge of introduction of slave crops was now under Vision 2030. Macadamia, avocado, I'll keep repeating. This, what are they called? The cashew nuts, the peanuts, not peanuts, sorry, cashew nuts, the macadamia, I've said those, the pixie oranges and mangoes, the ones for export. We're growing so many crops and so many exotic things to export, but not to feed ourselves. And at the same time, it's not like those places are doing very well. Those farmers are getting poorer and poorer and poorer, despite them growing these super crops. And these super crops, you can see what they translate into. They translate into things. Number one, the forever debt cycle. The one that is being experienced by coffee farmers and tea farmers has now gone to them. You have planted this crop that has taken 5 to 10 years to mature. It is a bane on you because every harvest time you have a bumper harvest and nowhere to take this because you have made them for the Mzungu, for the Western market. You have been, and they were introduced by NGOs. The government also did not plan our agriculture. And so when I'm answering the issue of social change is we've never had national planning. A Vision 2030 document is not a national plan. It is not mobilizing people and actually organizing the workforce to deliver that activity. And so once you go to today's issue, well, it's 30 minutes in, so I was planning to really get in there, is now to focus on, based on today's issue, what is it that now those nations have done because they've captured that next. So here there is the touch on bottom-up. Bottom-up was meant to reduce cost of living. I'm going to laugh because you all know bottom-up has made everything bottom-up says it has done, it's the opposite. Cost of living has gone up because remember, we are importing everything. Our lives are on the mercies of the dollar. We don't produce anything. The corruption industrial complex makes sure even the government services are not tenable for most of Kenyans, so people have to go private. So eradicating hunger, ooh, I'm sorry. Just this year, the President William Ruto had to give food to Northeastern. He had to deliver food there. And it was like a national thing. During every election, it's by election, we are finding people just queuing for food. And then, of course, creating jobs overseas to sell people. The people who have made money out of jobs in Kenya are people who are the ones in the business of exporting Kenyans to go work abroad. Expanding the tax base, yes, because you don't have a place for revenue. You sold and privatized everything, and now they are selling everything plus the house. So they expand tax base. That's one thing he has done. That's one thing. So you squeeze people, and their lives are worse. You can imagine the irony of this document. There is increased cost of living. There is increased hunger. There are less jobs, but you have expanded the tax base. Then improve countries' foreign exchange balance. That's the issue. That's the one. And one of the biggest issue of foreign exchange is, say, oil, right? Oil is a big issue. We talked about the way oil was captured under Vision 2030, so that you got the privatization of KenGen and KPLC, and then the breakup first of all, and then the privatization, then oil, Changamwe refineries being the games they were playing with Mwai Kibaki, and then later Uhuru sells it, and Kenya Pipeline, which they are selling and privatizing. When even that thing, because that's one of the biggest issues that affects the foreign exchange, because the petrolila is still the system we have. And yet you want to privatize the oil refinery in Kenya through Dangote. Then Akili, CEO of Missouri, if nobody, this is inverse thinking. It's not even inverse thinking. there is no rhyme and reason to this. Whatever they've put here, except the tax, because they need to get more money to pay those loans, there is really nothing else. In fact, if there was no pressure for the loans, then promoting inclusive economic growth, no. The economic growth in Kenya has worsened because up to today, we still have marginalized and unmarginalized regions. I'll keep coming back to that. If they wanted to create an inclusive economic growth for Kenyans, counties would have been the priority of the Ruto government. It is making sure counties as the elements of production. And they started off with some lies. They started saying, we're going to set county aggregation parks. Every county that does will get 250 million. And then every county took, it's also their way of getting land in the counties because they have to find ways of taking that land and it being available and visible. So all counties rushed, got the land, and then the thing just disappeared. That was it. So you can see all the things they are saying they are going to do, and they've done and a bit better, bottom up, food and micro and small medium enterprises. They've given a lot of loans that are not tax affordable, and the monies are too small. Instead of doing national program, national housing, affordable housing. We've talked about affordable housing as the thing that could have actually made a very big difference if it was planned within a national economic production dynamic, rather than consumption to create landlords who will keep taxing Kenyans and collecting rent out of money that came from Kenyans' pockets. The issue of affordable housing is very clear. Affordable housing, when it was working before 1985, before Vision 2030, there was still affordable housing. It was based off workers. You got affordable housing at your hospital, at your police station, at your school, near your factory. That is where houses were done. In other words, they were tied to the productive zone. I hope now you can see what that means. Area of production, where you're working. They were not just built in the city. I hope. Now that's a problem, right? Because why are you going to keep crowding Nairobi and yet there is no production going there? The jobs there are mainly broker jobs, from insurance to banking to logistics. All these are basically extraction jobs. So affordable housing would work better if LAPSET, if LAPSET now was designed towards opening the North Frontier District for extraction, for production, not extraction, we would now be seeing all houses being pushed there. Remember, they funded the aquifers. Now you can see the scam. It's literally a scam. You build the roads that are extractive. That's the first thing. Second thing, you measure the water and you start extracting it. Number 3, the mining, and you start giving tenders. But you don't put the people there, because affordable housing is the only way you go open that region up, because it is tied to work. If you go work in a copper factory in Isiolo, it is 20-30 year project. You'll have paid for that house and built 3 more houses during that time, because it is affordable, it is not for profit. But this was just a way for contractors to make money, the government to get money, and then use a lot of public land and create landlords. That's it. That's a scam. It is not tied to any single productive base, and it doesn't have to be mining. Kama hamtaki kusikia zipelekwe Turkana, ziende Pokot, ziende Kitui, ziende Taita Taveta, places by there that have been marginalized, that have never even received resources of government, then put them in agricultural places. Put them in Nyanza. You can start growing food there and people can stop moving to Nairobi. Put them in larger parts of Ukambani for the Mediterranean climate. Go towards Tana River. You don't have to go to Northeastern. You're saying we are not going to farm. In other words, there are enough productive bases. Usually when you say agriculture is your focus, just for food security alone, you can open that with. So that is what we get as a country from the government. The scam of affordable housing. Ooh! Universal health coverage. I don't want to see. We've just talked about, today I did that video of universal health coverage. I did it and I showed you very clearly that Kenya can never have universal health care because it's captured between SHA and the hospital where the patient get care. There are like 1 million people, private people, who are making money out of this, and they're not providing anything except saying they are linking this to the brokers. All the people eating from SHA All these brokers, NHIF, SHA, now it's SHA. So let us look at them. First, the insurance companies and even determines which hospital to go. And they're all private, not private. So you first take away our money, which is supposed to go to our healthcare. First, all of it is diverted. Majority of it, not all of it, majority of it, so about 90% goes to the private insurance companies. So the private insurance companies first automatically remove SHA from the picture. So it is a profit thing. These private insurance companies got in through Kibaki. They are the ones who were the first. In fact, if you look at that, I can get that document here, add it for you so you can see, oh, I have that. I can add it here. So we can actually basically go through that. I think this is going to be, it's going to be very important so that now I stop guessing, or not guessing, but giving you how healthcare system was captured. Okay, do we go to that or this? Oh, this is better. This is better. Okay, I can have actually both documents, 1 and 2, because I may need to apply. Add image. There's an issue with my file. What is the issue with my file? Just a second. Let's try to add another one. How Kenya's healthcare was captured, part 2, open. It's not coming. I'm sorry. Okay. I'll try to get it. But basically the finance goes. So finance, insurance goes. The other person who gets it now, it goes to private hospitals. So the insurance doesn't send money to public hospitals. It's mainly taking them to, well, KNH and some could get it, but it's private. So already the money for treating parents, the patients is going to private, which means we are diverting our resources from patient care from public to private, like 100% diving. So now you're seeing 80% is gone. So that is the money for dealing with a patient, the relationship between the patient and the healthcare. Then you go to the second element. The second element now being you're supposed to fund infrastructure, cleaning, maintenance of the hospitals, now the building, not the patient care. So that one now is now directly, it goes to the hospital, but they are not allowed to use it. They must subcontract to cleaning services, security services, all the things, meals. In Machakos County, even one of the brewing scandals is that the food is grown in somebody's private garden because they have a connection with the governor. So now everybody is making money off this, and they go, they make their food, they come sell to the county at whatever price. And that is how it is done. So the hospital doesn't have money to manage itself. It is being managed by tenders. So that money goes. So it can never grow. It can be as unclean as possible. You find workers are not paid, toilets are not done. Who cares? Because it's that. Then Uhuru introduces even this makes it worse. He says even the equipment you have, leasing. They are not being bought. Leasing. And then when that leasing is not enough, you find now drugs are fully captured. Fully captured. You can tell they are captured because during Moi's time, pharmaceutical drugs for hospitals were different than the ones in the chemist. They were unbranded and they had a different color. Those guys were told, if you are bringing up, say, a paracetamol, it cannot appear like the one from the public hospital to avoid that. But people are like, Nisawa too. So even if you go for a rabies shot right now, something that should be at the hospital, you'll be told to go to private. So because they've taken them, there is no more, nobody cares anymore. So how can you then have private insurance? Now, Ruto comes and adds the new layer. So defunding counties and now making sure the equipment is rented. So delaying money. So that pushes the workers away. They have to go look for other jobs, as many as possible. Their working conditions are even worse. So you've taken the hardware, remember, the medical care, the money that's like the operating expenses, the money for running the hospital for the patient is gone to private. So they are being funded. The money for the hardware, for maintaining the facility is gone. And the equipment is leased, so it's not even yours. You are just going to pay money into a bottomless pit, and then the workers are going because their salaries are delayed by the national government, even if this thing is under the counties. And then what Ruto does now, he brings the issue of digitization. Now with digitization, the final capture is complete. even this system is administered by AI and can dispense to anybody. However, the metrics, in fact, one of the things that is within that is that poor people pay more in Kenya per expense through this AI system and than the people who have insurance. That is how it does. I'm enjoying my coffee. I need it. So, mimi nimeona hiyo universal healthcare, you can't have it. That's what it means. We can never have universal healthcare in Kenya as Kenyans because it's captured. And whoever has captured them, be sure to know it is not you as it's not SHA per se. It is all these brokers because they're all brokers. They provide nothing. We can easily get our drugs from the factory as a country straight to our hospital. The doctors can be paid straight from the government exchequer, money going to the county and paying them systematically. You don't need this. Workers and everybody else is paid by the money to the hospital. They employ workers, cooks, everything, and food is bought under certain guidelines. Electricity paid, but nah. Insurance company makes the decision. And now let us look at the final thing of health capture, the medical tourism. Ilianza na Kibaki. A lot of people now making money, including our own insurance companies, pay people, not just to be treated in the private hospitals, but in India and other places. That's, I don't know what to call it. Hiyo ni kusema we have a problem with our sector, with our, everything is gone. Basically, that's what it means. Coming on to the final thing, digital superhighway and creative economy. These are buzzwords. Digital superhighway. We've already spoken when we were beginning that our internet is captured. By captured, it means we paid for the fiber optic, but we have now you can see what's wrong. Vision2030 was basically to enrich very few people. The enablers, OSG, MTP4, you saw the frameworks of development partners. Everything in Kenya now includes development partners, coordination with the people who came and killed the economy, removed manufacturing, made you industrialized, made you think you are so inferior you can never run an institution as government, you can never do work as government. They are the ones who are called development partners and program they monitor your work. In other words, the enablers of our poverty, because if you are saying these are the things that have enabled Vision 2030 to be what it is, then the enablers of our poverty, the creators, the drafters of this poverty design of a country that is apparently having a vision is these development partners. Because their interests are taken care of. For example, we just talked of health. Who are the beneficiaries of this? The workers, now the very trained workforce is working in their countries. The rest of the workers are you spend time in school because that's how we are measuring education, but the workers who are really getting jobs are going to work in those countries for now the low whatever jobs. That is it. If you look at healthcare, who are the biggest investors in these private institutions? And then the drug manufacturers, and then India, hospitals. It's not us. It's the development partners. They are paying themselves for all the aid and support, technical or otherwise, and in kind and friendship they offered. It was a spitting in our eyes. Anyway, let's see what challenges Ruto mentions before we go. He says, despite this, implementation of better faces significant challenges. First is fiscal constraints and rising public debt. Of course, unawezaje kusema if you don't work, Kenyans don't work. We are not working. As you've seen, we don't have any productive capacity. So then how can you say, then you have debt? Ini ujinga mgani? Nani aliandika hapa? Yani, they did not see this. They can't see this. You've said manufacturing is down. Electricity is up. Everything is up. The education is for people to stay in school. And then you say, there's debt. Yes, there's debt. You are measuring yourself with $1. There's not enough food. There's famine and all these things. Hey, apana. Secondary, while agricultural production, I want to read this because I want to see how Ruto is explaining himself, has improved in some value chains. By the way, they always talk of the value chain. Structural challenges such as inadequate irrigation. This is not structural challenges. This is the basis of agriculture, agricultural production. And these things used to be there by the Most people grew through irrigation schemes. Limited extension services, who broke them? They don't fund counties to do this. This happened under this government. In fact, since Uhuru, extension services were gone. I've been doing some surveys of that because I'm very interested in agriculture as a sector. Hakuna kwa counties. There's no money for that. And of course, county governments don't even consider this to be important. Kitui County, the richest, the governor who has spent the most money for personal office executive need, that is about 2 billion, spends about 200 or 300 million in the Department of Agriculture. He spends more money on himself, many times more than the agriculture thing. Then SMEs continue facing. We did an entire week or two talking about the difference between trade and entrepreneurship. Kenya has been pushed further and further into trade, neglecting production because we don't even have capacity to do cottage industries and to start processing things. And also trade now seems to be promoted as entrepreneurship, so that somebody who is selling mitumba or wares or importing things, they start to think they're in entrepreneurship, in transformational economy. These are just shops. It's commerce, it's retail. But it has become the thing that is promoted because we are promoting. And so the more we promote retail, let me give you the difference within the level of thinking versus reality. If you work, this thing, I bought it through Jumia, right? So that's a retailer. People say it's an innovation. It's just, they're using, well, yeah, it is. They use the online instead of physical shops, but the point is coming out. This thing is a job in China. The shopkeeper here just facilitated the transfer. That's Jumia. There could be about 50 jobs for this to get done. The people who made this, the plastics, the people who joined them, the people who made the shipping, maybe this was even done in a different country, the metal elements here, and so on and so forth. That's what it means. The steel works and all this technology and materials that when they were transformed into these items and then assembled and then shipped here. That's what you should be looking at, not how many of these you are selling. When the government focuses on that final part, then you are promoting the petty bourgeoisie. And the petty bourgeoisie, according to Marxism and socialism, is the people who now become, because they are driven by profit motive. And that is also the reason we have such high inflation. Why things are so expensive? Because remember, these people have to import based on the dollar, which has been going up and down, and there is a war going on. And also it was coming post-COVID. In a global economy, Kenya, the 43rd poorest country, is having to deal and compete on dollar terms. What kind of madness is this? And this is something that Kenyans have never grasped, that until we get a moment where we can say these basic things, a cup like this, before Kibaki, we made these cups. We did. We made them here in Kenya. But now we are not able to do something like this. Before Vision 2030, I won't say before Kibaki, I'm going to talk of Vision 2030 because that's the document we are looking at. So they say they have lessons. Let's look at the lessons very quickly so that we can know what they're talking about. Number one, global developments suggest that the world is transitioning from an era of hyperglobalization to one characterized by geopolitical fragmentation, economic nationalism, and security-driven development policies everywhere. In other words, we are going to war. Which is true. When you look at the geopolitics happening, right now, Egypt seems to have entered the chart of whatever was happening with Iran. But Kenya is a vassal state of the US, of the imperialist, number one. Number two, Kenya has been used, being a NATO ally, to also even become a threatening force across other nations. And that's a challenge. Oh, so out of that, then Kenya is at great risk of being the perpetrator or the one accomplishing the needs and desires and the militaristic forces or designs of the imperialist. All right. So before now we go to the final part, which is basically the same, which is what has brought us today for this hour. I'm going to answer these questions. What is your take on the implementation of Vision 2030? What percentage did you say has been achieved, if any? I would say Vision 2030 has been achieved. It was not for us, because there is no way such a document. So Vision 2030 has achieved 100% and 0%. By 100% and 0%, it means towards a globalized opening Kenya for competitors, for people to be able to come to Kenya and do whatever they want. They've done that. We don't make our goods. Anybody can come to Kenya and sell. We are customers. Kenyans don't do anything. When it comes to healthcare, we are clients. We have been made into hyper buyers of everything by the state. But out of that, it has not fulfilled any of the promises of the of our constitution. But Vision 2030 does in fact provide for all these spaces to happen. And so it has achieved that for the globalists, for the elites. That is why they are celebrating it and they keep implementing it. If you look at things like the LAPSET, they are opening those corridors for extraction. You can see the Dangote, you can see the mining activities and the tenders being issued. So it has achieved that in the way that it's supposed to, so that Kenya can be fully set for extraction. But for the Kenyans, it's zero in terms of reality of the poverty. They have said, at least they acknowledge that. Number two, the historical issues. Kenyans are still in limbo in their own land. Number three, the unemployment. So even at a present crisis, inflation, unemployment, and basically lack of basics for most Kenyans, including their social safety, is a concern, because people are living under worse conditions before Vision 2030 started, the journey started. So for the Kenyans, it's zero. But for the World Bank and IMF, it's almost 100%. That is the paradox. So, because if you ask the World Bank, they have achieved everything they ever set to achieve. The power of Kenya is now, they invested, because by the time they were coming to force privatization, they knew they were going to first to give the loan. So look at all the loans they've given. You can measure by the loans they've given. Every loan they've given, they've been able to insert a privatization bit. They give free primary education loan. Now education is privatized. The charters and the workers are going to work in those nations. They've spent more time in school, they go work in those nations. That's one. You go to energy. You come, you put money, rural electrification, you capture energy, you privatize it. They own some of those big investments. And then they also buy energy from the other investments they've done across the region. You go to water. You go to roads. All these, the roads don't have mobility. They are there for extraction. So according to the World Bank, IMF, when it comes to achieving their goal, they have. In fact, as Kenya is saying, they implement, even you saw the document when I was reading, they implement this with the development partners. And this has been a big achievement for them. In fact, no policy in Kenya right now, be it at the national government or in the county government, is implemented without their approval. So the World Bank and IMF have achieved the Vision 2030 for themselves. Kenyans, no. That is the paradox. We are captured fully, truly. Right now, there is very little that is not. Even when they're talking of the securitized state, Kenya even invaded Somalia, right? Kenya has been, 2011, we did. From that invasion of Somalia, you can see the way the conversation moved. We started under Uhuru, it was the Muslim terrorist cells, right? That was hyper pushed. Then the securitization of the state security apparatus, now digitization and mass surveillance, which they say is normal, and we accept that. But it's not for our security. Security has not improved despite all that investment that has been put, particularly into the Kenyan security apparatus. Kenyan security, right now we are reporting so much insecurity. And yet, so much money, in fact, most of the security forces are militarized. So much money has been put into that, but for us Kenyans, our insecurity has increased. Are you now seeing the paradox? But right now, Kenya can be put immediately to go to war to another country without a problem. If there's a problem of quote unquote a riot, if Kenyans are protesting, the streets will be blocked instantly. But should there be a fire, okay, should there be a crime happening, you'll never be able, even the 911 is a problem. Should you walk a dark alley right now in Kenya, even in the streets of Nairobi during the daylight, your phone will be snatched. Yet we say we have done state surveillance. That is the issue. And if you protest too much, you are called a terrorist. So even those laws now are being used against Kenyans. I hope now you can see the paradox of Vision 2030. Tomorrow, if you come to TikTok, I'll give that summary, and I think this will be the talking point. Now, Vision 2030 has been achieved by the IMF World Bank, but not for the Kenyan. And everything is, they've achieved that. Right. PY 5B656. I hope I've answered you and I've not given you dissatisfaction. So best gold digger video. Where can I get the document? I have the document. I think I can upload it on YouTube after this. If not, join the group, right? Join the group. I'll put my number here. So if you go on WhatsApp, I'll put my number here. WhatsApp, right? For documents. Yeah. So just get it. I'll send it. Just say I want the document. I'll get it for you. There. So yeah, let me put that as the reply. Okay. Okay. So with that, we are now an hour in. Let us go into chapter 3. The first world, hallmarks of a high-income industrialized nation. First of all, they had to define what that is. They say technological advancement, high levels of economic development, industrialization, and human well-being, basically. Such countries have high income per capita, low levels of poverty, long life expectancy, and universal access to education and healthcare. Basically, the things we don't have. So that is what the first world hallmark is. Out of that, this is the one I wanted us to look at. Let us look at the 8 items. Number 1, world-class education skills. Skills and innovation. Education plays a role in building human capital, productivity, innovation, and improving competitiveness of the private sector and the country in general. Okay, let's pause here. Education plays a role in building human capital. Human capital is the worker. Just in case the terms are like you're wondering what's the human capital, it's the workers. So first of all, it must create workers. But besides that, the workers must be effective. So the productivity and innovation, that kind of thing. The workers are able to do better because they have the skills and the know-how. And then improving the competitiveness of the private sector. If you are building an economy, an education, in order to serve the private sector, you are going to fail. I'll explain. Even Europe. If you look at America, you look at Europe, the development of the workers came by industries that were kind of socialist in nature. Even housing. When the US was expanding in the 50s and after the war and 60s, it was expanding through what is called National Socialism, in that money was put in for people to expand. And schools and other things were pushed in. Trade schools and the rest were put in so that people can work, can build houses, and so on and so forth. When that dried, then the private sector now became the only place you are getting jobs, and the government stopped working and providing jobs. If you look at the UK, for example, that has been part of it. Of course, manufacturing, offshoring jobs, you can't dismiss that. And the private sector does play a role. But the first element, especially for us, because I think the person who is reading the characteristics of education and the hallmarks, they are reading at this one, particularly from now the industrialized stage, rather than where it starts. I hope this is making sense. They are reading the place now than the place then. I'll give you the other examples. By then, education, trade level education, like you finish class 7 and you go to learn trade activities, is enough. Even China, sure, people were finishing school, but this was like almost 1 billion people at that time. The majority were going to TVETs and training and small. Then you go to the factory. That would be the other thing for Kenya. Kenyans will be going to the mines and the farms. So building that human capital, not even, that is why we said they don't have to spend so much time in school. They go to work, and so that you're not putting them to school so that they just live long enough so that they can be able to be exported to the Gulf states and to the other places that need cheap labor, unskilled labor, low-level labor. This should be the labor that is actually utilized in the nation because it can grow faster and longer. We go to high incomes, human capital index, and the high quality of life, above 79 years for most countries. This is true. But high income. Oh, let me use China. I'll use China because it's part of the case studies that they've used. So I don't know about Singapore. I haven't studied that, but I'll study it for the next one and I'll answer if you ask about Singapore. But China, what we now call the uncles, right? The grandparents, the people who built that country, they built it under those conditions, knowing that the sacrifice they do now, even Vietnam, the sacrifice you do now will give you tomorrow. I hope now you're getting what I mean. Like, tuweke boot, tuende kwa shamba, tutengeneze nchi yetu, because we know if we have food and then we are pushing maybe an industry like textiles, in 10-15 years, and mining, in 10-15 years, we will have gotten through this hurdle, and now more industrial elements will have come in, and the exports will be bigger and wider. You get what I mean? So that when you be retiring, there'll be a retirement fund for you. In other words, then you can even say, for us who worked hard and went to hard labor, we can retire at 50 and 55. The way the Chinese first generation are retiring. That's what they are doing, because they worked very hard to build the nation and they build the pensions. And then future generations now can go through what you call global standards of labor. The ones that are practiced by countries that did extraction through colonialism and now imperialism. And they rely on the extraction of raw materials from Africa and the global south, even Asian countries, for them to maintain those status. We saw what happened to France when they were not able to get the uranium from Africa. So that kind of thinking is what I'm saying. The problem with this document, it seems to show where they are now than where they started. So it seems it leapfrogs, as they said at the beginning, it leapfrogs the very important steps that these countries had to take. And that is why I say the biggest glaring thing is that this doesn't give us the process that these nations took to get there. You hear of Singapore. It doesn't tell you the process it took to get there. So they also omit, do we have similar conditions? But more than that, it doesn't talk about that for them to get there, they had to do the dirty work that we are avoiding to do up to today, including accountability, that I'm sure is mentioned here somewhere. Then capable and effective government providing functional basic services. Water, electricity, transport, urban services. Oh, but they don't provide any of this. These are all private. All water is paid through private companies. Power is privatized. They are now selling Dangote. Is going to provide energy. It's private. And transport, hakuna hata moja. Urban services, hakuna. Garbage, nini, nothing. Even drainage. So, we don't have that. Since they've recognized this, one of the things we'll track is this, exactly this. Moving on, high level, integrity, professionalism, and dignified public service delivery. Responsiveness and human dignity in health services, education, policing, and public administration. In other words, they are saying that you must have integrity and professionalism. They've not talked of corruption. They could have just said they are not corrupt. That's it. They are not corrupt. They are efficient. This is now where they bring productive. So responsiveness is one way, and productive is the other one. Productivity, not productive. Productivity of the social services. So that if it's healthcare, or by the way, they should be affordable and free, but education and policing, and then public administration. But they want to use words. In other words, don't be corrupt when you're doing the social goods, but also social goods should be available to all, not to a specific class of people. Then we have 5, high levels of formal employment, productivity, and economic security. No. Employment is a measure of production. Employment must be measured not in terms of productivity, but in terms of output. Productivity is the activity towards the output, but the output could not be there. The same way that our government is so busy moving around and being in the offices, but we have no output. Sindio, that is the point. That is the existence. We know this happened. This is actually what led to the corruption of our public institutions. They were in existence. They had provided for more. Look at university. They have formal employment, which is provided for. They have maybe economic security in a way, but they are not productive. There is productivity. The lecturers are on time, school is opening on time, but productivity in terms of producing research, practical research, societal and thesis that inform our national planning, and being able to create the knowledge power and the epistemological curation of both our present, past, future, and philosophy of managing Kenya. They just regurgitate the same theoretical frameworks that have been here since colonial times. So they are productive in being a productive colonial tool, but they don't produce anything worth producing when it comes to the Kenyan economy. That is the reality of our education. If you take that as a job, and that is why the jobs continue being unstable, because after some time, universities lose value, or that factory or whatever loses value because people are seeing it's not worth it, and also it's been captured. Then you find productive jobs. Productive jobs is basically tenderpreneurship, because they keep insisting on this, being productive, being competitive. These are terms the government should not be. They are using business terms to describe public service. I hope you can see the difference. They're using business terms, cost cutting and all that. That should come under no corruption, but costs. For example, let's look at people who consider cost versus government or public service when you talk of transportation. They say that the trillions of dollars used in the wars, right, in the forever wars in the Middle East versus the trillions used in China for the same led to a lot of public service. For example, you have infrastructure, the high-speed rail, the canals, the water, the planes, and all these things. The high-speed rails are not going to be profitable, may never be profitable, but they serve a function of the state, which is mobility. When you go to the US, because of brokers and contractors, because we are running the same economy, we can't be productive because of the same reason. People want to make a profit. Look at the SGR, right? Look at the SGR. Whatever was promised in the SGR versus what came out. Because people are looking for that. It's profits. Profit is what is instead of production, in that it produces actual results or output of what was expected from that investment. People are looking at how efficient was it in terms of delivering some metric that is not necessarily the function or the good and the end product that it was supposed to produce. That is a contradiction. Finally, no, not finally, rule of law, fairness and justice. Equal application of rules, efficient. Hapana. Justice system is a result of not just policy and the legal system, but also the police service. One of the biggest weaknesses of our criminal justice system, for example, so we'll go to the civil and the criminal justice system so you can see the difference. For the criminal justice system is that the police is still under, the security forces are still under the executive. They are not autonomous. And as a result, the decisions, they can be good, but when somebody who is for the state has a problem, they will be spared, or they will punish people who are seen to be anti-state, like the Albert Ojwang case. On the other hand, the people who are friendly to the state, so you cannot have a fair system while it's not autonomous. On the other hand, the civil service is now, the civil justice system is money. In fact, a lot of those people wait to make money. A lot of people, you have a case, if you even have an employment issue, your boss can easily bribe your lawyer so that the case is dropped. That is what we are suffering in Kenya. including issues of contract, basically whether it is insurance or contract management. That is the problem we have in Kenya. All right. What do you think of some of the challenges and policies that can be implemented in Kenya right now, which results can be felt and seen in a short time? Let me finish that and then come answer you, because I think that's a very good question. So I want to finish the final part, which is poverty eradication, inclusive development, equal opportunity. If you're talking of that, then counties should have been funded 100%. And of course, rectified historical injustices. The historical injustices of Kenya, the ones that are leading to extreme poverty. People who've never had title deeds, who've never even had schools development, because we had 60. People forget that Kenya did not start under counties. But you should rectify that, give a bit of reparations. Because now counties are devolving corruption, and those people are still being recolonized afresh. So we are done with that. Let me answer the questions before we go to the next part. We can do the things that we can do are to handle what you call the basics for Kenya. The basics are the things you need every day to survive. So let us pick 5 or 6 basics. Let's say food, policies on food. So we look at those basics and then see how to improve them, because the fantasy document that we have here that is emulating the industrialized nation seems to be emulating them not at their point of start or where Kenya is at, but at their end point, their current end point right now, where Kenya hopes to be. Like, you can see how that is inverted. So let us pick 5 things or 6. So we start with food, clothing, healthcare, education, then workers have to go to work, and then housing. So food, clothing, housing, those are basics, right, at home. Then to go to work, then you have transportation, then healthcare, then your education. There. We look at those 5, and I think they'll now form the basis of debunking this document. I don't think we have policy issues, we have implementation issues. Actually, we have huge policy issues. The reason we have policy issues is because you've seen all these policies are set by donors, by development partners. Our policies of agriculture are literally to be extractive, to provide crops for export. How is that an implementation issue? You are bringing back the words Ruto said, because he said the problem is we did not implement Vision 2030 well enough. He literally said that. He's like, wewe haukufanya ile kazi nilikwambia vizuri, you are doing that. Yet the policy, like we've said, Vision 2030 achieved 100% and 0. 100% for the World Bank, IMF, and the people who funded it, who write the policies, because those policies seems to be achieved. You've seen the influx of so-called investors in our lands, the mining and everything, the infrastructure is basically to extract. The policies work. You've seen, look at healthcare. It works. What it doesn't work is for the people. But the way it is implemented, remember these policies are reviewed and revised every so often. They say we have achieved this, we are going to the next one. It was not for you. So let us look at these 6 so that I can come back to you on the policy, and then you can see the issue. So we start with food. We've talked of food. Food in Kenya is treated as something that you need first to industrialize. That's the policy. Agriculture first, industrial path. By now, dialectically, and also through all these examples, none of those countries went agriculture first. It was agriculture end. And for Singapore, there wasn't even that, because it's not an issue. They have to buy the food. So agriculture first, we know, is a fallacy thrown by development partners so that we can produce premium food for them. Premium food here is what you call organic food, because the food we produce here is not even what is in the supermarket for the majority of the people. The avocado, the oranges and the mangoes and all these macadamia, they're for the premium users. Most of the people there, they use the GMO mass-produced stuff. So that's what needs to be maintained. And then things like coffee and tea, slave crops, and have been produced since forever. Kenya at the same time is starving. We've not, if now you want to address agriculture, which we did in the first one, so I won't repeat, but I won't repeat the details, but just the highlights. If you want to solve agriculture in Kenya, you must do the land policy issue, national planning on agriculture. Is the white settler highlands, because they seem to be the only focus of agriculture, go to the Mediterranean and what you call arid and semi-arid regions, which have rivers and water. We talked about water in Okabani, water in Lua Nyanza. Places that also could deal with a bit of irrigation, but they are going to mass produce and ease the white highlands. So you have food for Kenyans. And if you have food for Kenyans, then you start value addition. Value addition, not for export, but to stretch that food beyond the growing season, beyond the harvest season. And then from there, over time, you'll realize, oh, you're improving, and then you can start exporting. That is how they've done it, all of them. So the policy of agriculture is wrong. Right now, the policy of agriculture, which I can tell you, is focused on soils. Now, let me give you how extractive it is so that you can understand. The focus on agriculture right now is focused on soil health. They are talking about organic and inorganic fertilizer. They want to introduce, because their carbon credit, there was carbon credit and all these carbon removals and all these things. So they are looking at soil conditioning, bringing biochar and other fertilizer application to improve the soil condition, which is important and necessary, particularly in those areas that have been grown non-stop and also monocultured for over a decade now. Century, sorry. So to do that, what the policy is promising and what the GIZ were looking for. Do you know what is the recourse? What is the plan they have? Subsidies for fertilizer companies. The fertilizer that Ruto came to promise. Do you remember what we got in terms of fertilizer from Ruto? This has always been the design by the development partners. The reason Kenyans could be promised that, look at not just Ministry of Agriculture policy, look at also Fertilizer Association of Kenya, which by the way is private players, next. They are the ones setting these policies, and they are funded by the GIZs and the rest of the people, and the World Bank, of course. You tell me then how that policy of fertilizer subsidy is going to improve food production for the Kenyan. It is only going to give money to the fertilizer companies, of which Kenya owns none. One is owned by Chandaria, started in the 1970s, and the other one by the Dutch. It's rebranded a couple of times. Those are the major ones. The other one is from that fake fertilizer company that Jomo Kenyatta had started, that Kibaki paid for in terms of a loan. That is the extent of our agriculture policy. Even from Jomo Kenyatta, they've never thought that the rest of Kenyans can produce food. So the land and the national planning on agriculture. That is how you resolve now. That is the policy that can be implemented. And that policy would take this way. Let's be clear, because we have to answer this in practical terms. Number one, in the next 12 months, Kenya will not import basic food. If you issued this policy to Kenyans, not a single onion, green, white, ile ya kawaida, purple, not a single tomato, not a single kunde, sukuma wiki spinach, not a single piece of maize. Deal with aflatoxin, deal with it, aflatoxin, whatever, I forget that. Deal with no dairy, nothing. If you said that today, no cabbage, not a single food item will enter Kenya. The way they do that for all our food in Europe. Then what do you think will happen? Kenyans will plant because there's a market. And in 1 year, you have closed that loop. And then the more they are coming, now the Kenyan farmer for the first time is able to sell without competing with the cheap imports coming from Uganda and Tanzania. That's it. And over time, it evens out and production keeps increasing and foods go low, so that tomatoes will stop rising, but they'll fall. The reason they will fall is because there is production capacity here, number one. But number two, because we are not having to spend money on the fuel, on the bringing, on the brokerage, but most of the farmer has constant income. It is like you're having 500 shillings every month that you previously didn't have. So even for them, they're able to afford and they can spread the cost. Part of the reason the Kenyan food becomes so expensive is because you sell, you don't know if tomorrow you'll get a customer. So close off the Kenyan market and force production here and then move from there. That's it. The second thing, let me highlight this because we are working on it. The second one is now, so food, clothing. This one is simple. Clothing is the easiest. Actually, it should be the first one and it should go 100%. Say, in the next 5 years, Kenya will not accept fabric unless it's fully, will not accept clothes under certain tax brackets, of course, tariff them to the max, but no raw cotton, no raw fiber, no raw clothes. They have to be made in Kenya. So then you push, you say our path to industrialization will be clothing, textiles. And you start next year, all cotton wools used in all hospitals in Kenya, all, not just hospitals, think of jails everywhere in Kenya, chemists, schools, all the places. I don't know where cotton wool is used. It's used everywhere, right? All those things should be Kenyan. Then now you go to the fabric. You say something like, oh, you see these bags, I don't know what we call them, the bags we use for carrying clothes, you push those to something like fiber, right? The sisal. So you push now productive zones, split Kenya for fiber, for textiles. First of all arid and semi-arid places have already the skin, because skin is part of textiles, that is leather. Then they have, as you get more out of the arid, coming to semi-arid, you get the silkworm, but you also get sisal, because where you can irrigate, you can get sisal. Then you're coming to cotton, and then from cotton now you're going to banana, and then from banana you go to the merino sheep, because those are now the highest, coldest. Oh, and you have hemp. Hemp is between the banana and the cotton. That is the zone where you can grow those ones. So you have enough fiber crops. And that now is what we say textile is able to grow alongside agriculture, because you have a reason to do an irrigation scheme for hemp and cotton in, say, Ukambani and Luo Nyanza, because unlike now, just for sorghum, people might not find that viable. But if it is going to support now the other industry of the spinners, the ginneries, remember then textiles, and then dressmaking, and then now dressmaking would mean mobilizing education towards dressmaking, towards textiles, the engineering of it. Remember, you have to create a lot of factory spinners and whatever's in the large factories. You can't import all of them. You import a couple and then you start replicating them in Kenya. And that is how you grow that sector. So we have dealt with food and clothing, and you can see how those two tie alongside. Let's go to food, clothing, housing. Back to urban housing. Now, urban house, the affordable housing, sorry, not urban, affordable housing, as we have already talked, so I won't go deeper into this because we talked about it earlier, so that the people who are listening on this on repeat don't keep coming back to the same thing. We talked about that in depth, right, at the beginning, when we were talking about the bottom-up economy. And so in that case then, you are able to open up not just agriculture in these regions that have been neglected, being called marginalized, but now mining, and even in the pastoralist communities. And so opening those up now with affordable housing, housing spas, hospital, schools, and other social amenities, and also security, which is part of the thing that they're pushing. And if you're able to do that, then people are even able to ease off towns, and the rent economy and even the standards of living in Nairobi become more affordable, and inflation comes down because rent is not so much. And you also discourage that rent economy. That's what you mean. You uncapture the Kenyan economy. Food, clothing, housing. Then go to healthcare. We've talked of healthcare before, so now let's go deep into it. Sorry, we've already talked deep into it now when we're talking about all the elements of defunding. This one is simple. It's a single switch. In fact, this would be the easiest, by the way. This would be the easiest. Healthcare, just simply say, we are no longer funding anybody private. Defund private insurance, meaning private hospitals, meaning private brokers, no brokers. It's defunded. All money will go from the government to the hospital or the drug manufacturers who will deliver, and so on and so forth. There will be no broker. The national SHA, the social health, whatever, will be able to invest that fund so that we can have healthcare as Kenyans. You simply defund them. You say there'll be no tender. There'll be no private insurance. All services, counties hire your people. Give them a living wage. Give them job and job security so that you can even start building more staff houses. Hospitals in Kenya before Vision 2030 used to do staff quarters there because doctors work crazy hours. This was part of the affordable housing that was tied to work Kenyans. We talked, I'm sure now the replay crew will come and realize how this ties together. You tie it to the production units there so that now doctors are even incentivized to work wherever, because where there is a public hospital, you are assured there is public housing. All hospitals in Kenya had housing, even dispensaries had housing. 2024 2023 we went to Nyeri, one of those small dispensaries, a level 2 dispensary, but it's an old one in Mukuru. I don't know where it was. There were staff houses. Sure, they were dilapidated, but one of the main clinicians who was there lived there in those staff quarters. And then the police, because they are next to the police station, and the police also had poor conditions, but there people lived because it's better to live there, even for your own job, even if it's not, it doesn't have inpatient, so there's no night work, but for you as a worker, and especially when we're opening up Kenya, when you know the conditions of Kenyan situation, then it is now where you put your affordable housing. Oh, come on. If these people have a job that is guaranteed because now the work is in government and it is part of the Kenyan policy, then that's it. The economic spur that can happen, how much Kenyans can save. Do you know Kenyans are now getting bankrupt because of healthcare? Right now. Today, somebody is going to have to sell their property, their car, and everything, or take an extraordinary loan to take care of their health care. Something that is just so that all these people can eat. Brokers. This is the easiest. So the changes would be healthcare. In fact, you have to do something for this parliament. See if we can push something. I'll put here, let me put, I don't know if I can do a poll. I can keep this poll for as long as possible, or I'll do it after this. I'll be like, can we have a push for this, and we just work towards it? Because I'm sure this will be watched for a long time to come. It's on YouTube. So we've done food, clothing, housing, healthcare. Let's go to education before we go to transport. Education in Kenya, like we said, is not the time, it's the work. First of all, scrap national schools. The national school system, what was Omekwa? One of the things I say, and I know people, when somebody says a point, even if it is has an undertone, you have to take the point that it was. Gachagua was right, but also wrong. He was right in saying children don't have to spend. Do you know how much parents are spending to take their children to high school? And then it's a hierarchy that has no basis whatsoever, because an A student will always be an A student whether or not they go to Alliance. That's a fact. That's a fact every confident A student knows, because you did not start in Alliance. You started somewhere and you were with students who didn't go to Alliance, and yet you went. That is how everywhere in the world works. Number two, if they are within your zone, you can watch them. Then first, that is the first thing. Scrap movement. Let people move for training. And high-end training. High-end training. By that we mean you can move for university or technical courses, but things like local jobs, especially tailor-making, dressmaking, textiles, farming, driving, the way they are, like driving, use driving school as your measure to move. You don't go to Nairobi to learn driving school. You can learn it at home in your village polytechnic. Return that there. That is another counties, by the way. It should be within every market center should have a polytechnic that offers those basic lessons. And to make it more accessible right now and immediately, that you get the local people who, because there is that path under the TVET law. Oh yes, the TVET law allows for experienced people to come and teach you. A driver can come and teach you. They are given the instructional manual, they pass and immediately can start offering. And when there is no student, they continue their work because they have a work. That is even how part of China did. Because you don't have to train 1 million people through the national whatever. That bureaucracy for the colonialists need to go. I can train people. I have a group of people that I offer ninis for dialectics, right? That's what people want to know. They want to learn how to do dialectics. It's basically high-level analysis, right? Being able to analyze things through a specific matrix and framework. Some of them may never do dialectics, but they are going to learn how to analyze and to be able now to have like this conversation I'm having about the Kenyan economy, where I'm able to cover every aspect of the Kenyan economy, and having that information in your, I won't say in your head, because some of this you may not, but over time, I'm 45 years old this month, so I have the experience. So that person, if they keep now growing their knowledge, they realize then you become meritocratic in terms of understanding economic development. That's what we mean. So you don't need that person. You just need, you want to learn how to cook, for example, for your local hotels, because you are promoting local tourism, the digital, the economy they were pushing. You don't need to go to Italy College. That is for chefs and stuff. But for you to handle food and butcher and be such a job in your local area, for you to be a good butcher, you go for that for 1 month or 2. You are taught the basic bookkeeping. Should you become a butcher, you are taught how to cut, flanking, cutting, slicing, grinding, dealing with meat, cooking, ile soup ya hapo, doing motura, a couple of things that can promote your business in your in your village polytechnic. You graduate, you have certificate. That certificate shows a couple of things. Number one, you're aware of the hygiene, because you're trying to improve the standard of that delivery, right? The delivery standards. That person knows hygiene. They know also the business. They also know how to handle things. When they see meat, they can be able to do even basic testing, managing it, making sure it is healthy for consumption of the people. And you are a certified butcher in a month. That one is easy to train. Easy to train. People need those skills so that we can say people are qualified. So something like that is now what you do in terms of making it at the village. All the businesses happening there can be done there. So if people are learning, say, nail tech, right? Nail tech is a skill. Technology changes very fast, right? Like nail tech, I'm seeing gels and all these things. Natural. So, but I know those things happen because I'm on TikTok. And out of that now, instead of all these cases we are seeing, we've seen eyelashes and we've seen people getting stuck, and also the weaves, especially the glues one, and even makeup now. You go there, you get like weekend training. Some of the best salonists will come there, train you, and they'll even offer internship. That becomes a thing. And if you are a trained salonist, a beautician or whatever, you can do that effectively. So we have made things complicated for ourselves for nothing. That is how village polytechnics used to work. Tailors come and show you how to cut clothes, how to sew. Remember, it's not just cutting clothes. Some of them are doing wool, making sweaters and all these things. And then shoemaking, cobblers. Skills that people need because we don't train them. These are not skills that you need to attend 4 years in a college that you move. So I'm in Machakos right now, right? I'm in Machakos. I don't even need to take a bus to go do that training. My nearest market should have that place that offers it, so that if I go there and request a teacher, somebody will come and train me, but it's very practical, the same way as driving school. Moving on, that's education. So before we move on from education, so we've talked of national school, the hierarchy, local training, so that now people only need to go for advanced medical, for technical class and university. That one you can move from your home, because people never move from home. Just think of your shags. I want us to stop being elitist, because this vision is very elitist. Think of this vision as something on your ground at home for the Kenyan, because there is a reason productive units were pushed to the counties. And this is for that exact reason. At the time I was extrapolating Vision 2030, at Vision 2030, in the year 2012 and 2013, this is what we envisioned. By the way, these are provisions within the county mandate as per Vision 2030. Who came and made sure it doesn't happen, but also other things and all the special interest. Let's not name names, we are discussing a policy. The other part that is very critical, I have a glass, I need water. Okay, the other part that is critical for education that I must mention, if you are taking notes, is the issue of now defunding private education. The same way we've defunded healthcare, now I'll take some time to explain how you defund education. By now you have realized, if you are here, what defunding means, what privatization means. Privatization means there are people who have learned shortcuts to enjoy public money and public resources, but they are doing it for profit. So they take advantage of the system so that they can do profit. So how do they do private education, and what are the loopholes that need to be closed? We have a couple. Number one, the private public path. The private public path in all nations that offer, especially China and others, is not available. If you go to private academy primary school, you cannot suddenly go to a public school, secondary. But that could also be removed when you make them local. Secondly, you can't go to a public university because you are using a loophole to pass, to enjoy things, and that is what defines. Because if our focus of education is not on our public schools, then they start being defunded slowly, because the attention, especially of the middle class, of the people who have money, is not on the schools. The reason our secondary education is so focused is because everybody's kids go there. The reason parents are willing to take their children to primary schools that don't have a field, but the children can be force-fed to read so that they go to a national school, but pay a lot of money for that. They don't care. But if it is a public school, the elements of education will be taken care of. You look at Olympic Primary, other primary schools were able to function in urban and rural areas. They're able to do well if all the aspects of education are taken care of based on the education standard, not making children become something they're not, and forcing that in a way that is sometimes abusive or corrupt. So if you are able to address that element of defunding, removing the path from private to public and private and back again, you can move from public to private, but if you go private, you can never enter. The other part of that is, if you do private, your education is private, you can't do public work. That is national planning for education. By that I mean, you can't have come from a group of schools to say you're going to become a public worker. You have chosen the path of the private. You are learning. Your ideology, your philosophy is not based on the public good. It's based on private exceptionalism and idealism. So defund that path, so that the people now who have a lot of private schools will choose to continue that path, and parents will make a decision. Right now, we don't have that option. Parents make a decision based on my exceptionalism. I want my kid to go there because it looks fancy and good. Also, because we want to defund those people are making sure we don't focus on what is happening in our primary schools. The congestion. This is since Mwai Kibaki. We've talked of education. Go to the TikToks. I one day do one here, a live session on that. Oh, Phoebs, hi. Sorry, I didn't know it was you. Okay, very practical ideas on the change we need. Now we need a mindset and radical people to implement ideas. I like, since Sunday, people have been calling this radical, and it is radical. The final thing is transport. We talked of those 6, because I'm sure there'll be people coming for like whatever. So the 6 thing. So we started with food, clothing, housing. We went to health, education, health, and now we go to transport. People have to go to work. Mobility of people. Transport is the same. First defund, but defunding infrastructure is very simple, unlike the rest. The work must be done by the workers. What does that mean? It means the Ministry of, what is the ministry? Civil Works? I don't know what the ministry is, by the way. The ministry in charge of transport, not construction. So, let's start from there. We once had Ministry of Public Affairs, Public Works and Civil Engineering. That is what we had. It used to do all the jobs. People were employed, all our engineers and technicians and such were employed under the ministry. There were site managers, there were all the levels of engineering. The Institute of Engineers would graduate its students and they would enter that job market. 90% of all of them, the rest went to private players, because remember, people do private houses and private infrastructure is done, but the majority went there. They're the ones who built the roads and constructed, and then Kenyans were hired to do the rest of the work. There were equipment and the rest of the things. We did that. We built our roads. Then Vision 2030, oh, fuck us. Like I said, Vision 2030 has achieved what it wanted to achieve. Ikakujan and Akibat. And the loans, they're like, when people bring loans, Kenyans don't have to. The Ministry of Public Works and Civil whatever was broken up into departments of overseeing contractors, consultants, who are paid by the government through our fuel levies and others and the World Bank. So what happens is you have Kena, you have Kera, you have Kura, then you have now NCA, National Construction Authority. Their work is to issue a lot of certificates and people to learn. You only need to get that paper, which, by the way, pharmacists are also selling. If you have that paper, people buy your paperwork so that they get contracts through political favors and do jobs that are substandard. And there's nothing you can ask, because that is part of the political favor of supporting that candidate, whether it is the MP, whether it is the government. Everybody has a construction budget in Kenya. So you first remove that. There is no more construction budget. All the works are done by either the ministry itself or a state corporation designed for that, so that if a road is bad, if there is no drainage, if there is a problem, we know who is responsible and they can be fired and give reparations. Sasa ukienda kwa friend ya nani, or these ones that are being done by Chinese and they own them and they have the loans, we literally surrendered our sovereignty. That is why the focus on infrastructure is big. Look at the ones funded by the World Bank. What can Kenyans say in terms of, we don't need this extraction corridor? So when you have this as the ongoing mechanism for delivery of the basic things that Kenyans need, you have a problem. But more importantly in transport is now the transportation, the mobility aspects, from the vehicles to the rail. So what can the government do on that? First, if you bring down the cost of constructing the infrastructure, it helps. It also leaves you aside some money, and that becomes, if you want to invest in our roads, part of that must be to create the mobility aspect of it. You can't just do a rail without the high-speed rail or whatever rail. So if you do a road, then if you're funding a road, the vehicles along it, public ones, must return. This is a must. We saw that it had been requested and had been put as one of the things. Yes, you must have that. The transportation means, those are the policies that can be implemented by Kenyans to afford the basics everyday life. In other words, you remove all the people who are eating from those things and you deliver directly to the people. You plan the economy around that production, that industry of textiles or whatever one, and mining and urbanization is able to be eased from the cities, but people are able to live not so much in urbanization areas, but in a place where their housing is tied to their work. It is not consumptive, it is productive, the way we used to do. So it is not a new phenomenon. It's not funny that doctors have houses. It is actually now abnormal that there is no staff housing provided for doctors, policemen, and teachers. That's how it was. So now even minors start getting that work, and so on and so forth. All right. Thank you, Phoebs. Yeah, because it's true. So now I want to come on that. But by now you are starting to see that, I hope now we have been able to actually prove that Vision 2030 achieved what it was, because this is the design that was introduced by IMF, World Bank. The funding and the policies when they are praising the road networks they have done, that's what they are praising. They're not praising the cost it took us, and that is why the focus now is on debt, so that now they say, give more taxes. Chamazi wapatie pesa. Pay more taxes. There is no money. We reduce spending. We reduce more spending, which means reduce services. Now cut off services, cut off payments for education, for healthcare. Make people suffer more because you are saying the problem is debt. Problem is not debt. The problem is not debt. Oh, let me clarify on transportation part. Okay. Transportation, for your information, if you lived in Nairobi up to the early 2000s, but say up to the late 90s, this is how transportation in Nairobi was. And even when I was in KU, it was like that. There were scheduled buses across all parts of Kenya that were operated under Kenya Bus Service, previously Moi Bus, Nyayo Bus. Sorry, not Moi, Nyayo Bus, Kenya Bus, Nyayo Bus, then again to Kenya Bus. So I confused another video that I did on TikTok that was just on Nyayo Bus. So it is Kenya Bus. But for me, since I got it when it was like Kenya Nyayo Bus, that's the name that stuck. And Kenya Bus, KBS, starts. It's the company that ferries people. It is scheduled. It is all over the town, urban centers across Kenya. Now, what this does is, first of all, since it is public service, there is no profit motive. The only cost it needs is to meet the cost of its maintenance, the cost of its drivers and workers, and then the cost of now fuel and other things. Remember, it's also not even paying kanjo. It has designated spaces for stopping, and it is working on a schedule, so it can move anytime. And so even the issue of congestion and overloading is not a factor, because the next bus is coming. People are not thinking there is no other vehicle coming. That is one of the things that has come from the matatu culture. And so as a result of that, people are able to move from work all the time, every time. Even if you go, there is no peak and off peak. Secondly, there were trains. When I was in KU, there used to be a train coming from Juja all the way to town. By KU, it used to pass around 7, and you get in there 6 something, and then by 7 you're in Nairobi. Trains improve mobility in denser populated regions. So Rongai people coming to Nairobi don't need a bus. It is not economically viable. Sure, there can be a bus, but the main thing that should be established between Rongai, between Kino, from Thika, so move past Juja now all the way to Thika, to Machakos, and so Machakos at River, so all the major arteries. So, and of course the entire of Eastlands. So Njiru, from Kamulu, even Tala. So Tala, Limuru, Kiambu, past Kiambu, think all those roads must have trains. And these trains converge and move at different times, but they are there mainly for peak times, so they are longer on peak times. You know how trains work. So during peak times in the morning, you can say you have the 5 o'clock train, because they don't have jam. But then the reason it could be at KU at 7, 6:35 or 6:50, and in town by before 8 is because there is no traffic jam for the train. And so in those densely populated regions, to avoid the vehicles and the buses and the cost of it, is now to make sure you can move from that to town, and back. So at the peak hours, and then during the day, you have 1 or 2 trips, because if you have that kind of mobility, people are also traveling all sorts of hours, and it is cheaper and affordable because you want people to move. But in the evening and daytime, you have like 3 or 4 trips. So every hour you have, every half an hour, sorry, usually half an hour. When she leaves at 6, there's another at 6:30, 7:30, 7:30, 8:30. So no, maybe earlier, so that you have 6, 6:30, 7, 7:30. 4 trains leaving in those major areas. That's what you need, provided by the government, for the government. So it's not private mobility. And then now, that is how you move a working nation. That's how you move workers. And then now you can expand them to other busy towns. But we said one of the things you have to do is now to ease transportation. So it should also be Nakuru, should be in Kisumu. I don't know about Eldoret being a city status, but definitely Mombasa. Mombasa is another place with huge problems. So apart from the train comes to the ferry and back, right? Bringing people closer there, and then post ferry to town. That's now Likoni. Then you go to other places. So Chakama, you're going to now that side of Malindi. So I don't know the exact places. I just know them, like if you are traveling, you're going to this side and that side. So you have them bringing people closer all the way to town. That's about it. That is literally it. And so you are able then to make transport available cheaper, and cheaper even when you have an oil crisis, for example. It doesn't mess Kenyans the way we are. We are right now working and operating under the cartel, or the mercy of the cartels. That is the matatu cartels. They can hike them as they want. These are private people. Remember, they make profit off this. You can imagine how affordable transport would be if that was not the case. Not only do they make profit, but the economies of scale and operation are so tiny. 14-seater matatus from Machakos. Hey. It's too much. It's too much. So when they say they've done the expressway, it's basically for people who have money to enjoy the privilege. It is not to transport the workers. The workers coming from Machakos, they're going to Kapa, they're going to industrial area. None of them are going across these factories along Mombasa Road. They cannot afford to use the expressway. They want something that is 40 shillings. 40 shillings to Nairobi. And remember, let's talk Kampala, because we need to look at what even our neighbors are doing. Kampala have solar buses that are these ones like the airport ones, like the stretch ones that you can transport people. That's also another option, especially if you're coming from Machakos. Machakos is, you will not suffer solar, but I don't think it's the solar directly. I think it's just a battery. And so if counties actually introduce that, you have people now coming towards the county center. You don't have to go straight to trains, but those buses can become the thing that brings people to the main urban centers, but also are able to move now people to town. You have buses that are by the county to take people either interregional based on the major hub. So in Machakos, people are going towards Nairobi, right? But if you are in Kisumu, is not the major hub for now, counties around there. So it doesn't have to come to Nairobi, but goes to the major, you get what I mean, the major commercial block, and so on and so forth. Yep. Yeah, it's long overdue. Na hizi sasa ndio vitu hazikuwa kwa Vision 2030. They were there in kind, in spacing, but not in practice. So we've talked about the skills, we've talked about functional institutions. I think we will cover this next time. We have, it's an hour, 56 minutes. I've talked for almost 2 hours. Just a minute, I take a sip of coffee. The next video, the next live session will be the day after tomorrow. So it's usually the day after, in case you're planning your calendar. I've pushed the starting time to 8:30 because even for myself, children are on holiday. During holidays, my son sleeps at 8:30, but now things have changed. So I've pushed things to 8:30 also so that I can do everything. And when I come here, even if I finish at 11, I'm able to be functional, that I don't have things to go, like I've finished the things that I need to do for the house. And I'm also now new in YouTube. I didn't know how many hours I need to spend here. So let us look at some of the other things that are pushed as first world solutions that we don't have. So one of the things everybody keeps talking about is high income, human development index, and high quality of life. Let's talk about income, because this is a problem. People are thinking of money. Money is relative. And by that I mean, if you look at countries with a high GDP, for example, like the US versus China, that money is useless. By useless, I don't mean the money is useless. I just mean somebody in China earning even half your salary is living a better life than somebody in the US. So the high income in the US is because the healthcare, you have to co-pay, the education, the transport. Remember, they drive everywhere. The food is so expensive. The work is not even provided, and so on and so forth. The distances of transport, and so on and so forth. Then the rent. The rent. It's like people literally work to pay rent. The housing conditions have become worse and worse. People are living in the trailer parks, or not trailer parks, but the ones with the RVs and such, right? Compare that to China, where you have 95% home ownership, but not only that, but at work, the transportation is cheap and affordable. That's not what I meant. That if you are pushing for those high salaries, it's because now it inflates everything else, because everything is being provided at profit by everybody, and you cannot even be constant. Right, back to the profit. High home ownership, almost 95% or above. Secondly, work work, transportation is cheaper and affordable. So we'll go back to the basics we are talking about. If those basics are internally managed, then healthcare is universal. Then you now go to things like clothing, access to things, but food. That's one of the cheapest places to get food, and it's healthy food, which is also good for your health. So when you tie those things together, and food is provided at most workplaces, employers provide food. So even for the lower the income job, the more they provide those amenities of food and even transport to and from work. So, and of course the mortgage for it, so that you don't have the pressure. So coming out of that circumstance or that situation, you find that you don't need to be earning 5 million shillings just to survive. You're okay with 500,000 shillings. That's what we mean. Because nobody is over-exaggerating. And remember, the corruption layer is being removed slowly by surely. And then service delivery is because there is no profit motive. Then it's 100% because everything has a center of responsibility. If you go to the hospital in Machakos level 5 tomorrow, you can't get an x-ray, then kuna ule mtu kwa sababu hata machines juu ilikuwa everybody knows healthcare is there for everybody, and we are all watching. If you go to your child is in high school in your locality and you find the teacher ana randa huku akifanya nini, unamuuliza. Akifail mnawauliza na nyinyi kama watu wa hapo. You should have the same graph, and so on and so forth. So that's why it's called the wrong measure in a way. The high, you see what they are pushing? High incomes. Moving on, we talked about the China generation that went to work to build the China, the workman, the people who worked to build this state. They have now retired very young, and like other nations that are retiring in their 60s, they are all over, they are healthy, they are moving, they've been provided even social amenities for exercising, for their well-being, so that they can become active members of society. But also because of the way families are structured, they also help with childcare and all these other things. That's the Chinese society. They've been able to structure themselves in a way that, which is very much in tune with the African society that Africa can emulate. But if you are emulating the exceptionalism of the high salary, where is this salary going to come from? And we have 7% manufacturing capacity. Na hiyo sasa hata ni hapo. I'm sure there is over exaggeration. Remember, some of what we are manufacturing we can't even buy here. Clothes zinaenda huko US agua because you can't afford. So it's not on you, it's the people. Then effective functional institutions. So they say the rule of law and the law of development. Everybody says this. Let me tell you, if we don't have an explicit statement that says we deal with corruption, you end corruption in all public offices, zile zingine ni bogus. That should have been the first thing. Rule of law. What is rule of law? They use the constitution by there to justify corruption. The development of what we call now the corruption layers, the state capture layers of Vision 2030, and I say healthcare, they are all legal. They are all of them are legal. All of them. Moving on, high revenue base to support service delivery within accountability frameworks. Unaona, they want high revenue. From where? How? Service delivery within accountability frameworks. They want high revenue so that they can monitor and track things. And yet the only thing you could do without doing, because high revenue leading to high incomes, because that's the demand that is going to come out of it. And then that is the corruption layer. You don't need, with whom are we competing? It is because they want to always add the corruption layer, so that it becomes very expensive to access basic services, the ones we've talked about. Life is so impossible, and because everybody needs to make a profit out of it. But if education, healthcare, and the rest, you don't have the corruption cost, Kenya should not need such. If medical was available, you don't need to pay 200, 100,000, and 50,000 for insurance per year to access it. Like now, if like me, I'm not employed, that's what I'm supposed to be getting, to be giving. Why? And you're a taxpayer. So you can see they are inbuilt corruption into now even Vision 2060. And also, they are inbuilding the current status of these nations. The revenue right now in China is being enjoyed by the, let's talk about revenue in China versus even Japan versus what Kenya is aspiring. China has not faced the inflation levels we have, right? Revenue, in fact, they are deflating in terms of cost of production, in terms of cost of goods, because the more they expand their production base, the more things become accessible, and also because of technology and innovation, cost of production goes lower and lower, so you deflate. Things don't need to keep going up and up and up. This proposal is working on the premise that we will still remain an open global market for anybody to be able to come in and prices go up and up and up. But it's not just the socialist nation. Even Japan experienced that until just the other day. Prices never changed in Japan because they were able to control that. And of course, they have a strong manufacturing base, even if they were getting their items from outside Japan. They were able to do that with the fiscal keeping interest at zero. Of course, now we know there is that other challenge, but yes, because now a place like Singapore, because we are using that as our case study. Singapore is now experiencing a huge crisis. People, they say the biggest migration of people over the weekend and during the day is coming from Singapore to Malaysia. Singapore imekuwa kama dormitory. It's like Nairobi. Na ushago ni another country. And it is going to get worse. Yeah. So what are we going to be talking about them that time? So high level of integrity, values, and ethical behavior. Just a minute. My son is calling. Give me a second. Can I, Mister? Nelly, go sleep. Just a minute. I'll be right back. Nelly, come. Let's go to get Anthony. Go. Okay. Have you brushed? Go brush. That is there. Go brush. Then I'll come say good night after I'm done. I'm almost done. Okay. I'm closing. Nelly will not come, okay? So we are almost done. That's my son, obviously. Oh, okay, it's not obvious. So anyway, so out of the goodness of looking at Singapore is also to look at with the because we are learning from what is called living examples. What is happening in Singapore that you can also learn from? Because the other, I wouldn't say contradiction, but oversight or deliberate whatever they've made is they've been unable to look past. Sure, they have developed, but what are their ongoing conditions? But of course, that also arises from the same contradiction where we didn't say this is what they were doing before they became developed. But after they became developed, have they been able to sustain that level of development and those conditions of living? But one of the things you can say, and Kenya needs to learn from, is the ethical behavior. But integrity is the wrong word. Integrity is self-expression. Work integrity is different. It's like exceptionalism. Like integrity is me, I take care of me, and values and ethical behavior. This is not, it's like trying to say those people have high levels of integrity, values, and ethical behavior. Yet we know from the laws and the persecutions and all the cases of corruption that they are the same. They've just instituted. So they are trying to make Kenya think like this is a personal responsibility, not an institutional responsibility. I hope now you get what I mean. It's like telling people, it's the way they came to tell us we are corrupt. Huh? IMF World Bank. They said that break your eye, whatever, do this because you're corrupt. Government should not work because it's corrupt. Later we realize they are the ones who have inserted these elements now, we know. So by saying that the Asian countries are ethical and whatever, everywhere the human behavior is the same. Sure, it is a product of society, but it's that institutional integrity. And by that we mean having in place ways and means to make this behavior happen, to enforce. Enforcement and deterrence are the key things. Like we said, for example, when it comes to our security and criminal justice system and even civil justice system, is that they are still tied to the executive, which means the power. They bow to the crown. Therefore, anybody who is on the side of the crown at that time is free to do whatever they want. They will never be persecuted and criminalized. Secondly, Kenya doesn't have even those reparations. By that I mean, if people are able to negotiate to return some of the money through the Anti-Corruption Commission, but they don't even do, all the people they were with, we never see the gang that was used in the criminal conspiracy that was used to steal money from a public enterprise. We also don't see criminalization of omission of corruption. There is commission and omission of corruption, not removing corruption, but corruption by commission and corruption by omission. Commission is where you take money, you steal money, you take something. Omission is where you refuse to do something so that you benefit from that negligence or that lack of oversight. We don't see that. So there is no... This is nonsense. And look at... It's 2 paragraphs. 2 paragraphs. This is literally the entire Singaporean model. Look at what Xi Jinping came to do when he talked of finishing the flies and the spiders, the tigers and the whatevers. There were two types of corruption, the large officials and the small ones, the big deals, the military, the what, the ministers, the mayors, those guys, and then the small guys, the peppers and the tigers. I don't know what they are called. It's flies and something. I don't know if somebody on the chat has the answer. So out of that, when China was doing this, they had even sometimes, I don't know, Croatia tried. You create special courts, you create special provision, you change the constitution, you amend it, or you make executive decisions to change that. This sometimes takes entire 5 years just to implement. It will actually become, when we're talking about the vision, on Saturday, I talked about, let's assume William Ruto was right in saying we work with a vision. And I did that. And a lot of people assumed I was supporting it. No, I was saying, assume that we don't have a history, a past, or whatever. Then how would we move on? We say we are sitting at a blank plate. There were 3 things we explored from dialectics. The first one was, number 1, mobilize the nation to work towards being productive, towards being industrial, which was get the people, the workers. So education, everything must be geared towards achieving that. So the police, everything, the way you create that national education, like we said, we don't know what's happening. The counties, everybody's aware, we are now going to become mining efficient, we're going to become textile efficient, we'll never wear anybody's clothes in 5 years, we'll never eat any food from whatever. Mobilize the nation. The second step was manage the operations. And that is where now you say you can't commit or omit to do the work. If you commit the bad deed, you'll be punished. But if you also omit to do the thing you're supposed to do, you'll be punished. Not only will you be punished, there'll be reparations for that. You'll be punished, you and the people you're associated with. You'll be barred from ever participating in public office. A special court and special dispensation will be convened so that your crime is bigger than what you call a criminal crime, a civilian crime. Because you are an official, you know better. You should be punished more. So if you have stolen medical equipment or money for medical whatever, or if you absconded from your work, right? You don't report, you have your own private clinic that you run in the night, then your punishment will be, first of all, to return that salary. The people you have colluded with, the people who worked with you in that hospital, knowing that you're in a public hospital, anybody who came, and then you can never go back to public. And your license is revoked. Same as a policeman. If you are caught taking bribes, first of all, you're punished. In fact, you can be flogged. Secondly, I hope so, that's what they do in Singapore. And then from there, your license is taken. It's not just suspended. You are taken, and the people, your supervisor, who should have been watching, because there is IPOA. I don't know what is the equivalent of IPOA for corruption, but yes, your supervisor, if you were together with another colleague who didn't report, For example, it was reported by somebody else or snapped through a camera or something together. You become your brother's keeper. Those are the systems that are instituted. Corruption is a social disease, a social thing that is human nature, that has been there since time immemorial. The effort must be deliberate. It cannot be 2 paragraphs. Hii ni mchezo. Finally, eradication of extreme poverty. Kenya has 4 levels of extreme poverty. We start with the ones we know. The first one is on what you call coastal Kenya and places that have never gotten their land. These are places that came to be recolonized again. These are places that the people have never been able to even use their basic asset of being Kenyans to be able to benefit from it. So to get loans, to use that, they've never had property. They live in the extremest of poverty. And these are not just those ones, the displacement, the colonial land. So you have coastal Kenya. The land is taken by local elites. So you saw the Kenyatta government, those people taking that land. That's the first one. Right now, if you go there, Kilifi and those rest of the places, now they are undergoing what is called gentrification. Local elites have gone there, they are buying those beach fronts. They are displacing them. The other of the same character are now like Maasai and pastoralist communities where the whites have never left because they've occupied those places under conservancies and tourism. They are preserving wildlife. Those places, all of them have certain characteristics, not only the wildlife, but a lot of minerals. So we know a lot of things happen within those regions. And those places have never been allowed to have, the land is owned on community basis because if they owned it themselves, they would be utilizing it. Decisions are made through elders. And today we were talking in my friend's chat on TikTok, where we were talking about the issue of those Maasai elders. If you go to Pokot, those elders, they have started trading their people. They sell their land, they really mismanage their people because they're people like us. Corruption is with the elders. That is what is happening there. So that's first of all, those people, the extreme poverty is that. Then we have the extreme poverty as a result of the colonial economic system, that is urban dwellers. These are the second. The reason I'm putting them 2 is because based on huge numbers and sheer ignorance by Kenyans, people think the slum dwellers are the worst. For some reason, because that created the best picture. Do you know why? In the emotional poverty porn, it was easier to show people in Kibra than to show the Maasai, whom we took as our token tourist trophy. Or to show the Digo, because the tourists are going there. All the places that are exploited by white people, we never saw the extreme poverties that are there, Kenyans. We were only told, oh, Maasai ni wakoaje. You all know the jokes you made. You know the jokes you made of Coastarian people. You know the jokes you made of the Turkana and those people. You call them bandits and pastoralists and people who are... Yet, you found a way to pity the ones in Kibra and Madare and wherever else, Mukurwa, Kwajenga, and all those other places, because they were marketed as people deserving your pity. Why? Ask yourself why. Those people even had a way of making a living, at least, were considered more poor than these people who've never even had land. And they don't have even the education and means of survival that the others have been given. Ask yourself as a Kenyan then, how has even poverty been marketed to the world and to Kenyans? What do you think is marginalized places, dry and semi-arid places you are not even supposed to look at? Because a lot of us Kenyans ignored those places. What do you think that place is? That is the place with the wealth. That's why you are not allowed to look. For almost 70 years, this is the time we are starting to look. And it is not well captured here. That's number 2. Number 3, we have the now displaced Kenyans. Due to 2 things. One, the ones you talked about in coastal Kenya, but more so in places that were white settler highlands, the places that Jomo Kenyatta took the land and never gave. The places in Mount Kenya are experiencing the highest inflation. the highest levels of displacement internally, where people now no longer have ancestral land and means of production. Before Kibaki was president, almost every home in Mount Kenya had a cow. There was something that was productive. Now those places have been gentrified. So they are being gentrified, considered to be better, and taken over by now the urban elites and the global elites. Look at Murang'a. Murang'a is being positioned as a place you can come from Vienna and go live there in almost similar climate. Car displacement. There's a reason the hustler message really resonated with people in Mount Kenya. And a lot of people think, oh, they were going at it for the money and Arab Mashamba. No. It's because these people had seen the end, the dynasty had taken most of it. And the only thing that was left to a lot of these people, the young people especially, was hustling. Because there's no more, there's nothing you can hold on to that is real, except maybe your bike or something. The hustle was real. Extreme poverty now. Extreme poverty and gentrification being pushed aside. That's that one. And the final block is now majority of the Kenyan youth. Over 80% of Kenyan youth don't have any form of job that assures them of 1 year salary. And the rest of you, but the youth. And because of that, and not only because of that, they also lack the skills to do that job. So their only recourse is to be imported, exported to other countries for labor. Kenya right now currently exports more people than coffee or tea or any other thing we are producing. Our biggest exporter is people. And with that, I will tell you that is the final culmination of Vision 2030. So if we are saying we are eradicating extreme poverty, and we're talking of high income jobs and so on, and not knowing that people are being exported to go do those jobs of driving and house nannies and cooks and domestic workers and all that, then we have not looked at ourselves at what we are as a nation. Therefore, that is the state of the Kenyan people. Kwa corruption, yes, also you cannot finish corruption with the same system that creates corruption. Both Singapore, China, Vietnam, they all did away with the systems that enable corruption. It would mean doing away with Vision 2030 as a whole. Also undoing the colonial veil. You've seen where I've talked of extreme poverty. Nilianza wapi? The colonial land issue, that injustice, coming down to the urban. Those two are created from that design of that economy. Then the modern economy, particularly the post-Vision 2030 economy. We have a good gap of time. So I'm going to read the last point. The ideas alone, that idea alone are not enough. Lasting change also requires disciplined organization. Yes, we said the work would be every day, all day. Right now, the Chinese, whatever, besides planning, the parties, even Singapore, dealing with addressing corruption, making sure it is working, and the plans are going accordingly. It is that management, like I said, the operational bit, after you have mobilized people towards a vision, the daily discipline required to look at the loopholes, because they will always be trying to find another way to make sure that you are not waiting for 3-5 years to rectify. You are rectifying it as it is happening. The way you say when you have a kid or you're training a dog, you discipline it at that moment of breaking the order or going against your rules. That is what you need as a nation. And this cannot be done by the same people who have been the institutors and instigators of these corrupt institutions. And therefore, political education, like we are doing here right now, I hope you have enjoyed that. And also people who are committed to serving the public interest. In other words, We cannot be doing this by people who think politics is a way to get rich. I have given a motioné of a video on my TikTok. I'll make it free here so that you guys can enjoy as a reward. If you've watched this, look at the video that I'll post after this. It will not be live, but it's like a phone recording. I just basically take you through a politician who wants to run for office in Ukambani somewhere, and how their mindset is. First, they start with the exceptionalism. We talked about that at the beginning of this video. Somebody says, I'll be good, I'll follow the constitution. Me, I'll solve this, I'll not be corrupt. Then I was like, what constitution? Done by who? Created by who? Who funded it? We say we have the most progressive constitution that has never given us any progress, precisely because it is designed to ensure you worship the book. And you live here in worship of the book without any reality. And that conversation regresses, comes down to the worst element. So I'll give you as a thank you, and you guys can enjoy it. So I thank you for being here for the last 2.5 hours. I thank you for the questions and the discussion. So we will see each other the day after tomorrow, so we can look at part 4 of this Vision 2060. I hope if you have any more questions, if you are coming to watch this on replay, ask the questions away. Tunaendelea hivyo hivyo. So with those few words, aluta continua. Bye bye. Be good. End stream now.